All right. Hey, my name is Michael with ImageEyes, and we are changing our company name to SpinTech. So sooner or later, we're going to have that new one. For now, I got the ImageEyes shirt on, and I'm sporting that for right now. But yeah. Anyways, this is a whiteboard. I wrote a whole bunch of stuff on there, and I'm going to explain to you the differences between capturing 360 images with your video or with doing still shots. If you're brand new to 360 photography or you're just starting to learn the process right now, one of the biggest decisions you're going to have to make is whether or not you're going to create a 360 view using the video record function on your video camera, or if you're going to take high resolution still photos using a DSLR camera or a mirrorless camera. So if you're in that stage and you don't know what to ask, these are going to answer the right questions at the right time, so hopefully you'll be able to hit the ground running. I'll try to be as thorough as I can without getting extremely detailed, but I broke this down into three basic sections. The first is the area for the specifications. So if you're a photographer, you're going to want to know all this stuff, and it's going to actually explain the reasons why you're going to run into other problems with the UX stuff. So if you're a UX designer, this is section number 2, and this is going to explain basically what matters and what the consequences are when it comes to actually putting this onto your site and how it's going to behave onto your site. The next one is destinations. So if you're more of a higher level, if this is kind of an executive level decision on your team, and you need to send this to your board of directors so they can understand why it's important to do video or stills or what kind of equipment they need to invest in, then this here is going to let them know what the consequences are from capturing their 360 views with a video system or with doing high resolution stills. So we'll get into that right now, and you'll be a pro in no time. So, or at least by the end of this video, I hope. Okay, let's dig into it. Okay, so let's go into the specifications first, because this builds the foundation of proving this, which proves this stuff over here, okay? Okay, so specifications, what's that? Basically, this is explaining the technical differences between what happens when you capture a video or whether or not you capture stills. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'm just going to use like 30 seconds to quickly explain the differences between capturing video and capturing stills. So basically, what happens when you create a video of a 360 view is you usually have a motorized photography turntable. They're usually really cheap because it's just a little motor and it just turns at a consecutive speed. It usually takes about 30 to 60 seconds to do a full revolution, right? These turntables are super cheap. They can be about $100 plus or minus on Amazon. They're not very much, and you just put a product on there, you hit record, you do a little bit more than a full rotation to make sure you have enough extra to record the video, and then you cut it at the very end to kind of trim it, and then you have this full complete video file that starts and stops exactly at the same point, right? Simple enough. With stills, you either do it by hand, you turn it a little bit, and then you take a high resolution still photo using your DSLR camera, and then you turn it a little bit more, you keep doing the shots until you have a series of high resolution still photos. It's just like a stop animation, like if you've seen Wallace and Gromit. Back when I was a little kid, I used to watch that, and there was these little clay figures, and the animators would take a picture and then just barely move them a little tiny bit, take another picture, and then they do that thousands and thousands of times to make a complete movie. That's exactly what the process is when it comes to taking still photos for your 360 view. You're just making a stop animation of it rotating. So you're capturing each frame one by one manually. Or if you have an automated photography system, you'll have a motorized photography turntable that's usually computer controlled, and it rotates, takes a picture, automatically sends a signal to the camera to take a photo, rotates it a little bit more, and keeps doing that. There's tons of advantages and disadvantages between each system. Video is usually cheaper. Stills usually gives you more versatility in terms of capabilities. So now that you know the differences between the two, let's dig into it. So when it comes to doing video, you're usually using still continuous video lights. So they're lights like these right now, and they just stay on the whole time. And when you're using stills, you're usually using either those or high resolution or very bright strobe lights that just pop on really, really bright just for a fraction of a second, just like the flash on your camera. So with resolution, with video, with that in mind, usually when it comes to recording a video, an HD video, which is 1080p, is going to be 2 megapixels, right? If you actually do the math and figure it out. If it's a 4K recording, then it's going to be 8 megapixels. And someday when 8K becomes more popular, it's going to be a little bit over 30 megapixels. But for right now, that's very far out there. So realistically, most of the time, under 90% of the circumstances, people are going to record in usually HD for a 360 view, which means it's going to be around 2 megapixels. So it's relatively low. When it comes to shooting stills, it's going to be between 20 to 50 megapixels, which is almost an order of magnitude higher than shooting with a video. Next is motion blur. Like I said earlier, you're using a very continuous light that just stays on the whole time. It doesn't fire with video. That means that it has to. That means that the video, when it's recording, the turntable's rotating, but because it's rotating, it's going to have some motion blur because it's moving, obviously. And the lights aren't very bright for videos, usually. So you're going to have some degree of motion blur. With stills, it's still, so there's not going to be any motion blur at all. It's going to be really, really sharp. The compression artifacts, so this is actually the compression that happens with each individual image for a video file. So if you actually take a video file and you decompile it, it's nothing but a whole bunch of individual JPEG images that are just captured really, really fast, like 30 times a second. So your video camera is actually it's actually a photography camera that records audio and takes 30 photos per second. That's actually what's happening. So with that said though, when it's taking 30 photos per second, it's going to have a really big file size. So it has to compensate by making a really, really high compression for each individual image that makes up the video. And when you're doing a 360 view, you usually pause it and then zoom in. And that's a big deal because if you have compression artifacts in there, you're definitely going to be able to see them because there's no motion involved. It's frozen, so you're going to really delineate or really expand any compression artifacts that happen. With stills, it's the extreme opposite. There's cameras, still cameras are usually designed to have a really, really low compression algorithm for the cameras. So your DSLRs are going to spit out really, really clean files with very, very little compression for the JPEGs. And that's if you shoot JPEGs. You can also shoot RAW too. Frame count control. With video, pretty much no. I mean, yeah, you can do 24 frames a second or 60 frames a second, or you can do high speed or whatever, but for the most part, you can't really reduce the frame count very much. So if it takes 30 seconds to do a full rotation and you're doing 30 frames a second, that's 900 frames. That's pretty much almost as the least you can get it to is 900 frames. Think about that. That's 900 photos. With stills, most 360 views have between 24 to 36 photos. So when you're stuck with 900, that's a lot. And you'll see later that causes some problems, but for now, just keep that in mind. Depth of field, what is that? That's adjusting the aperture value inside of your lens. So as you make that hole smaller, it makes the overall scene darker, but it also expands the sharpness of the front and the back of a product. And with video, usually you have pretty dim lights, so you have to make that aperture really big, which causes the foreground and the background to be kind of blurrier. With stills, you can actually just adjust the shutter speed, and you can make that aperture really, really small because you can just adjust the shutter speed, which you can't really do with video because of the frame rate. So unfortunately, you can make you're really limited in how wide the depth of field is going to be. But with stills, you can make it as wide as you want. And the wider it is, the better it is, because that's more of your product in focus. So if you're shooting a canoe, for example, it might be fine if it's angled like this, but if it's angled towards the camera, the front of the canoe and the back of the canoe are going to be very, very blurry with a video compared to doing it with stills. So. Next is trimming. What's trimming? That's basically the extra editing you have to do. So when you make a 360 view with a video, you got to record a little bit extra at the end, so that way you have just enough to cut that off later. If you don't record enough, then you'll have this big gap between the front and the back, or the beginning and the end of your 360 view, and you don't want that. So you have to trim it, and that means you have to do manual trimming for every single file. It's just extra editing time. With stills, there's none, because you just shoot the number of shots that you need, and you're all done. Not unless you accidentally shoot a couple extra shots, but that's pretty rare. So, noise and grain. It's moderate with video because, again, you're usually dealing with not so bright lights, so you have to make compensations inside the video camera to be able to make it bright enough. And one of those things you kind of have to do to a certain degree is increasing the ISO, and that causes a little bit of grain. With stills, again, because you can adjust your shutter speed, you can bring that ISO down as much as you want and you'll be good. Especially if you're shooting with strobe lights, for sure. Yeah, you can bring that down to 100 ISO and you'll be good. Next, overall sharpness. Overall sharpness, when you take into consideration the noise, the depth of field, the compression artifacts, the motion blur, and the resolution, and you add all those things up, and if you make all of those things slightly less good compared to stills, by the time you're all done, the resolution is going to be very, very low compared to what it's going to be with stills. If you're shooting like, really, really high-end equipment for video and you're Steven Spielberg and you got all this really great equipment and you're using super bright lights and you have a really, really high resolution camera, then you can actually get pretty darn close to the extreme lower end of stills. But for the most part, stills in terms of resolution and sharpness definitely blows it out of the water. Especially when you take into consideration motion blur and resolution. These two alone are the biggest Achilles heel for video. So yeah. Those are the technical specifications, everything and more you probably ever wanted or needed to know. But that gives us the perfect framework now to talk about this guy, which is what matters when it comes to UI design and also user experience design. So if you're a UI designer or a UX designer, or you're in charge of the look and feel of your website, and you're in charge of making sure it loads fast and looks good, and you want to keep your boss happy, then this is your area. So let's talk about that now. Okay, so first things first, website speed, super duper important, more than most people actually realize. But yeah, for every second you shave off, it's a significant increase in overall sales when you aggregate it over a large sample size. So when our nerdy side comes out and we start to get out the measuring stick, this is very important. And when it comes to a 360 view, it's even more important because you need to load all that information right away. It's not like a video player where you can load the first 5 or 6% and then play while it loads the rest in the background using buffering technology. That's not how 360 views work. Usually the whole thing has to load right away and then you can start to use it, which means that loading speed is very vulnerable to the number of frames you have to load, right? There is technology out there. We actually invented some technology at Imagize called progressive frame loading, and that actually loads all the even frames first, and then it loads, and then it lets you play with it, and then it loads all the odd frames. But for the most part though, you're best off with having the optimal number of frames. When it comes to stills versus video, because you have control of the frames, you can just reduce the number of frames if you want really easily by just shooting not that many frames. With video, you're pretty darn limited because again, like I said back here, frame control, no, you're kind of stuck. So for the most part, you're going to be pretty darn stuck into a corner when it comes to the maximum you can really get out in terms of website speed. I didn't put an X here because you can get away with making the embed size really small, which usually for most 360 viewers, and you should check this when you're looking for a 360 viewer, make sure it does this thing called resolution responsiveness, which means that it actually readjusts the resolution of the image as it loads based on how big it's sized into a page. So if it's sized really small, it'll actually pull a smaller sub-size from the servers or whatever. So kind of technical, but just take that into consideration, super duper important. Okay, so if I haven't lost you on that one, embed size. Basically, when it comes to embed size, you're basically really, really stuck with a very, very small size because the small size means that it's going to load in a reasonable amount of time. When you're stuck with videos, you have a lot of frames, so you have to make it small almost no matter what. With stills, again, you're well within the range of okay, and it's usually around 120 frames. Anything more than that, and you really have to make the size of that 360 view very, very, very small. Full screen mode, that's just this on steroids. So if you think about it, everyone has a different size screen that loads your website and loads your 360 views. So again, with video, that's a super strong X. But with stills, that's definitely a good check mark because you can just make the number of frames a reasonable amount, usually around 24 to 36. Sometimes you can go up to 72 or 90, and you'll even be okay. But yeah, just keep that in mind. Next, zoom. This is basically full screen mode even more. You're not only in full screen mode, you need to zoom in full screen mode. With video, you can't do that because if you think about it, a lot of screens today are already at 2 megapixels, right? If you look at an HD screen or even those 4K screens or those Macs with those 5K screens, that's a huge size. I mean, 5K, that's getting close to 20 megapixels, right? Or even beyond, actually. So with zoom, you need to have these high resolution images, and the only way to actually achieve that successfully is by having stills. You're going to really quickly have some troubles if you're using videos because the file size is so small, the number of megapixels. Next is smoothness. Smoothness is really important to a certain extent. If you think about it, you're comparing a 360 view compared to most of your competitors, which usually don't have 360s. So if you have a 360 view, even with 36 frames or 24 frames, it's going to look really, really great compared to the current standards out there on the market. Still, it looks nice, but it does come with some disadvantages. However, almost always video is going to come out with a lot of frames, which means it's almost always going to look smoother. With stills though, it still can keep up with video, and all you have to do is just shoot a lot of extra frames, but it usually takes a little bit more time, which means that for the most part, video wins on this one in terms of smoothness. Don't get me wrong though, I mean, shooting a 360 view with stills using 72 frames or 90 frames, we're actually developing some new technology now at Imagize so that we can create a 72 frame 360 view in 13.5 seconds. Yeah, it's going to be really, really cool when it comes out, but it's super early development. Yeah, we haven't finished developing that technology yet. But as soon as we do, this will be a checkbox, and it'll be just as fast, actually faster than doing it with video at the higher resolution, by the way. But for now, it's not quite there. Next is transparency, PNGs. When it comes to recording video, it's going to be a video file, and 99% of the time it's not going to be RAW, which means it's going to be JPEG images, and it's going to be stuck inside of a video file. It's pretty hard to extract that, let alone remove the backgrounds perfectly and create PNG images with transparencies. With stills, you can do that all day long. Just write an action script in Photoshop, and we're going to have a lot of tutorials coming up on that one on how to do that. So it's going to be really fast, really automated. And remember, you're only dealing with about 36 photos, whereas with this, you're dealing with 900. So definitely doable. Usable product photos. These are pulling still images out of a 360 view somehow and using those for other stuff. So product catalogs, stuff like that. With video, again, you're kind of stuck because you're really stuck with a really low resolution with motion blur and compression artifacts. It's just not designed for being pulled out and using it for print catalogs and high resolution stuff. Again, with stills, this is the camera that you use for making extra shots. So definitely, yes, we're good on that because you're using the same camera for making high resolution print shots. Next is product animations. With this, remember that Wallace and Gromit thing I was telling you about? You get your hands in the way, you adjust it, you move your hands out of the way, you take the shot, your hands are out of the way. With video, it's recording the whole time, so you can't just quickly move your hands in there, move something around, and then move them out of the way. It's going to be in the shot. So you're stuck with video. There's some kind of, if you're very, very creative and you know how to do video animations like in post, yeah, okay, you can get away with some stuff. But for the most part, fundamentally, stills is going to be able to be super adjustable. So you can actually, you can actually put a product on the turntable, make an animation of it rotating, and then you can actually disassemble it part by part, and then put it back together again, and have that be part of the animation, which is kind of cool. Last is interaction. So interaction is basically the ability to have it spin. So fundamentally, a video file, you can't put that into a video player. You can put that into a video player, it's a video file. But when you use a video player to click and drag and go left and right and then zoom in and do interactions and maybe even add hotspots, you're very, very limited. And video players aren't designed for spinning left and right. It's very, very choppy if you try to take that timeline and you adjust it. But 360 views with stills, that is the sweet spot. It is absolutely designed for this. So you upload your 360 images to a service like Imagize, or when it gets changed over to SpinTech, and we will make a basically video player that's very good, super specialized at clicking and dragging left and right, and it's very, very responsive, very snappy, very fast, very lightweight, and very smooth. You can do this with video. You can upload a video file to a service like Imagize, but it requires some pretty darn advanced processing later to be able to put it all together, remove extra frames, and do all that stuff. So yeah, it is doable, but this is fundamentally designed for it. So you're better off there usually. Okay, so there's the UX stuff. Last but not least is the destination. So basically this is more of the business strategy stuff, and some of these have to do as a result of this. So a lot of companies that are in the CMS area, Amazon, eBay, these guys all take this stuff into consideration. So now you kind of actually have a ground foundational understanding of why the industry is kind of leaning more towards stills as a whole. So let's get into that now. Basically, there's two kinds of ways of being able to display that 360 view. So the first one is by just taking the MP4 file and trying to upload it to one of these websites. The other way is taking that MP4 file from your video and uploading it to a site like Imagize, where we then turn it into a 360 viewer, in which case it's exactly the same situation as this guy. So with stills, it's slightly different. If you have all your still shots, you can go into Photoshop and you can create this thing called an animated GIF file or an animated GIF file, whichever you like to call it. It's the same thing. And it's just basically an animation of a bunch of JPEG images with no sound, right? It's just one little file, and it acts kind of like an image file. And because of that, it has a lot of really favorable properties that allow you to embed it into most CMS platforms and stuff like that. Then you have the 360 viewer, so you take your still shots, you upload them to a service like Imagize or Spintack, and we'll give you a hosted link, and you can embed that link just like embedding a YouTube video. Same scenario over here, so yeah. Okay, so now that you understand the differences between these two, let's dig into it. So your CMS, a content management system, so if you're using a service like Shopify or Squarespace or one of the higher end e-commerce platforms too. Basically, you're going to run into some potential problems in case they aren't supportive of this new technology. And some of them are supporting it, some of them aren't. We're trying to get all of them to, slowly but surely. But for the most part, most CMS platforms will not accept an upload of an MP4 file. They don't want to deal with videos right now, mostly. There's some exceptions to this, but for the most part, your CMS is not going to be compatible with you just uploading an MP4 file. There are some exceptions to this. Very few do, which is why I did not put an X, but it's pretty much almost an X. When it comes to a 360 viewer, it's actually usually a checkbox, because a 360 viewer is just like embedding a YouTube video, and most CMSs let you embed a YouTube video. If you can embed a YouTube video, chances are you can embed a 360 viewer, which means over here, you're in the same boat, which is a good one. This one is almost always a checkbox. You can almost always upload a .gif file to a content management system or an e-commerce platform. Why? Because it's treated just like a JPEG. They treat it just like a JPEG. So you'll be probably fine with that one. So yeah. Next is marketplaces like Amazon and eBay. Those are the two big ones. There are others as well. But I included just Amazon and eBay for now. So when it comes to an MP4 file, if you try to upload a 360 view with your MP4, you can actually make that work. You can upload it to Amazon, and there's an area for like uploading videos as well as stills, and now they're doing an area for 360 views. But you can theoretically do it. It's not designed for it though, and you'll see why this isn't a desirable check in just a sec. A 360 viewer, no. I mean, if you try to put anything that's hosted onto Amazon, they're going to reject it. And since a 360 viewer is essentially an outside hosted element, and you're trying to put it into Amazon's walled garden, they're going to reject that for sure. They won't even let you do that at all. Same thing with a GIF. Amazon isn't really looking for GIFs. They're looking for JPEG images and video files. And when it comes to the 360 viewer, right? I actually put a checkbox here because this is actually 360 view stills, right? So if you have your stills and of your 360 view, you can actually upload that to Amazon's 360 viewer, and they actually have one now. And they're doing a pilot study. Some of our customers have gotten us completely in the loop with the whole system, even what they're charging. So right now, Amazon's even offering a 360 photography service. So you can actually send your products to Amazon. They actually just take your products from FBA and they ship it to their warehouse for free. And they do the photography, and they charge you anywhere from $50 a product to $100 a product, depending on the complexity of the product. Then they let you put those 360 images into their 360 viewer, and it works. That's pretty much it. Do you have to use their photography service? No, absolutely not. They gave us all the specifications of how to shoot the 360 images, their naming convention, how many frames you need to do. It's actually between 20 frames and 72 frames. We're going to have a whole video on just this topic in a further whiteboard presentation. But for now, all you need to know is that stills is the way to go for Amazon. Next is eBay. eBay's becoming less compatible with 360s, interestingly. Videos, you can't upload a video to eBay. You can't even embed a YouTube video into eBay anymore. When it comes to the 360 viewer, that's putting an outside 360 viewer into an eBay product listing. They don't let you do that anymore because they don't allow any external links as of 2 weeks ago. Same thing with animated GIF files. They don't allow you to, That's actually fine, yeah. So you can do an animated GIF file and you can upload that and it'll look, like how it looks. And then the 360 viewer, there's a no-go on that one. And they don't even let you, they don't even have their own 360 viewer for you to upload your stills to. Maybe they'll do it someday. Maybe we'll do a partnership with them, who knows? But for now, that's definitely a no-go. So basically eBay is nothing except for an animated GIF, which is super old school. But that's the way it is right now. I hope it changes pretty soon. Next is Home Depot, Lowe's, Napa. Like a lot of really big retailers are starting to go this direction, and some of them are even mandating that their vendors create 360 images in order to sell on their platforms, on the online platforms. So Home Depot, they don't want video files. They don't want your external 360 viewer. All they want, and with very few exceptions, they don't want an animated GIF. All they want are your stills, your high-resolution still shots, right? Between 24 to 72 frames. Or 20 to 72 frames. That's really what they're looking for. Some of them are okay with 20 frames as a minimum, some of them are okay with 24. But for the most part, you have to be really careful with this one, because if you want to be selling on Home Depot, you have to know their specifications. The safest bet is just to do 72 frames. That's usually the standard that they do, that they're completely fine with. So keep that in mind. Small retail sites, what are these? Well, if you're a manufacturer and you sell to other retailers that are very small, much smaller than Home Depot or Lowe's or Napa or like organizations of that size, chances are they're in the same boat as you with your content management system. Chances are you guys might even be on the exact same content management system. So you're going to run into all the same problems. I don't want to say problems, but the same kind of technical hurdles that this one is. So exactly the same thing. Next is YouTube. This is actually an interesting strategy that I see a lot of retailers and manufacturers use that are just starting to right now. It's kind of a trick. They'll actually create a 360 video from their stills. If you're using a platform like SpinTech or Imagize, then you can actually upload all your stills, and then once you're done, you can export an MP4 file, right? You can actually create a video file from your still shots using Imagize. You can do that in Photoshop, sure, too, or using like some fancy video editing software. But a platform like Imagize, where you already have your 360 views uploaded to, you can just create MP4 files from there. There's a little service that we offer that does that all for you. You can even control the speed and how long the video is. It's really neat. But that allows you to have a MP4 file, and if you have an MP4 file, then you can upload that to YouTube, because it's a video file. That's what they accept. They won't accept an outside 360 viewer. Obviously, they just want your MP4 file. They don't want anything else. A GIF, no, because that's not an MP4 file or a video file. And then with the 360 viewer, as long as you convert it into an MP4, then you're good to go. And because you can do that with Imagize, you're actually okay if you create your 360 views with stills. So YouTube is still a go. And if you just include a link to your product page in the YouTube description, that's a great way to drive traffic to your website. So just a neat little trick. Last but not least is social media. Varying degrees of acceptance. Facebook, almost no across the board, except for video. They'll accept your videos and they'll accept your GIFs. They won't accept a 360 viewer that's externally hosted, whether or not it's made with the stills or with a video. Instagram, same story, unfortunately. But Twitter is where it gets interesting. So Twitter, they accept your MP4s, they accept your GIF files, but they also accept approved 360 viewers. And we're actually working with Twitter right now to get our 360 viewer approved and as an outside vendor to embed directly into Twitter. They're very cooperative with outside developers. So Twitter is one of the very few ones that's very 360 view friendly. Will Facebook and Instagram do that? Yeah, someday. But they're going to be following the rest of the more innovative platforms that are more agile and less risk aversive. So that pretty much covers it. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful. I think next time we do a presentation like this, we're going to get focusing on Amazon, because it's just a brand new thing that's coming out. It's kind of a hot topic for the 360 view, and no one knows the standards or anything like that, and we're very familiar with it, so we're going to get all the details out there so people can hit the ground running and not have to be guessing along the way and make costly decisions. So yeah. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you stuck around this long. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Right now it's support@imagize.com. That's IMAGIZE.com. And also our new website is going to be spintech.io, I believe. That's SPINTECH.io. My name is Michael. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you at the next one.